morning, good afternoon. And we're here at Lethal Sales on Wednesday evening with me and Larry. If you didn't tune in last week, we are now streaming on 3 platforms. That'd be X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If you registered on LinkedIn for today's show, feel free to comment. I'm just going to put a quick post. Feel free to comment and ask questions. And Larry, since you're the brain trust behind this episode, maybe you can talk about the why as to why you chose this, and then we go from there.
Yeah, we're good if I'm the brain trust. Well, it's interesting. We saw a disastrous PR campaign for Bud Light, which cost a lot of people, including the company, a lot of money. I'm old enough to remember my all-time favorite car was my '69 Grand Prix. Who ever thought we'd see a day where there'd be no Pontiac or no Oldsmobile? And, obviously Nissan's going through some pretty strange gyrations where they announced a little while ago that they only had enough capital to keep them going for a year. And I guess everybody on the program's hearing the same things I am. Volkswagen's going to help Volkswagen. It's not going to help. It just seems interesting. So, like with everything else, just trying to examine, what keeps something going, what stops it in its tracks. And what do we see as the state of Nissan and other brands that get waylaid either by bad advertising, bad management, and that's all. I just figured get everybody's opinion on that since it's such a huge issue for dealers and for the car community. I just thought it would spur some pretty interesting dialogue. It's a pretty interesting thought.
But you missed the epic disaster that was Jaguar when they did their first ad without a car in the ad for the first time ever. And then for some reason, they decided, well, we're not going to make the car that we prototyped in our other ad. And then
there's a predecessor of that. I bet everybody on this program remembers that 2 cars came out simultaneously, luxury lines. Lexus showed a whole bunch of champagne glasses stacked up, and it was indicating how quiet and smooth the ride was. But does everybody remember that the Infiniti commercial showed no car? It just showed like a stream, and like it was like, huh? What are you selling?
Yeah, but I think the thing was really funny, Larry. I agree with you that the thing that was really funny was when someone put up the previous Jaguar ad campaign, which was about Bond villains. And they had like British actors talking about the brand. And then the new one was like, I don't know what it was. Like it still boggles the mind that someone thought that was like a good idea. But the thing that was more interesting than that was when there was all the hating coming, much like Bud Light, I'm sure, with Kid Rock shooting up Bud Light and a bunch of other things. The thing that really surprised me was that they were like, oh, well, we had to do a lot of different to fix the brand that is Jaguar. And I was like, fix the brand? What are you talking about?
I believe the expression would be not leaving well enough alone.
Yeah, I saw actually today, there was a post right before the show on LinkedIn as a gentleman talking about Shakiro Honda and how his parents, I guess his family's had a relationship for the brand for like 50 years. And it was interesting because when you look at Jaguar as a brand, I mean, they have a pretty storied history of design and elegance. To say, oh yeah, that's all garbage. Let's just do something completely different for no reason at all. Let's just do that. I don't know.
There's a pretty long history of, hey, what could go wrong if we merge some product lines?
Yeah.
Does everybody remember the disaster of Daimler Chrysler?
Yes.
And if you remember, if you thought of Jaguar, if you were into British luxury, that was the car. And then all of a sudden they're dealing with Ford. We've just seen some really strange marriages that have you ever been to a wedding, Jeff Shearer, and you're looking at the couple and you're thinking, oh my God, this is not going to last too long. It just doesn't look like the best match. They could have probably used some premarital counseling. It's almost sometimes you can see things are just doomed, and you just hope that it doesn't blow up too badly,
Well, that wasn't that true with Honda and Nissan? Like Honda was like, yeah, we might buy Nissan, but we're not really sure. Like we don't we don't know if it's quite fire sale or not sure we want to dance with that partner. There was like this on again, off again. I'm not
Is
sure what's
anybody
happened
hear
since.
anything different? I heard, and I could be, what the hell do I know, that there was a lot of pressure from the Japanese government just trying to find some way to shore them up, and not see a big product line. Hey, again, showing my age here, I remember when Lee Iacocca, through Chrysler, went to the government and borrowed money, but he paid it back pretty quickly and did what he needed to do. But I'm sure the Japanese government doesn't want to see something that's been a staple, right? For a long time, the number 2 brand from Japan was Nissan, tucked in right beyond Toyota.
Yeah. Well, but most people at a wedding at least look good. Nissan's got it's 1999.
But Jeff, the bridegroom isn't smuggled out the trunk of a car.
But Nissan is like leftovers, man. What have they done in the past 5 years to make cosmetically look better? They missed the boat on EVs, and they saw Toyota really throttle back on EVs and lean more into hybrids smartly. So they're like, well, gee, we missed that arrow, but here comes another one.
Well, I had a deal with a Nissan dealer, and I've had Maximas forever. And then they stopped making the Maxima, and then the good news came out, which was all bad news for me, that they were bringing back the Maxima after a little gap as an EV vehicle. Well, I don't mean any disrespect, to Elon Musk. I'm just not an EV guy.
Right.
So you have a model, and let me tell you something. People that have Maximas love their Maxima. It was a really well-placed car. Yeah, but when you start attacking, but again, boy, I sound like a broken record here today. Forgive me. There's a precedent for that too. I don't know how much you folks realize, but quite often the manufacturer design department smokes a lot of marijuana before they make their decisions.
Yeah.
This is a little before my time of getting into business, but there had to be a lot of weed and real strong weed when they sat around at Cadillac and Olds. If you all remember, the Toronado and the Eldorado looked great. And they sat around and said, let's round off the back of these cars. Nobody will notice. The year before, in 85, 25% of Cadillac's business was the Eldorado. The car looked great. In 86, the drop-off was so precipitous, it was kind of pre-Bud Light numbers. You look like you're chuckling too hard there. Russell, what are your thoughts?
I'm just listening, and you're making me giggle. I can barely function. I'm so tired right now, and so yeah.
On a side note that is geared towards my good and great friend, Mr. Hill, and for anybody else that treasures music half as much as I do, I'm all in. I dragged my wife to the County Theater, which is this little small art theater in Doylestown, PA, and saw they repackaged John Lennon's one-to-one concert. Yeah. Many years ago. Geraldo Rivera did an expose of where they were back then they called them retarded. I'm not being disrespectful. And they were in such horrific conditions that people were appalled, and Lennon and Ono decided to do a concert. They didn't show any of this other than him singing at the end, but Stevie Wonder was on it, Melanie was on it. But my goodness, was Lennon's performance is powerful. I mean, it was, if anybody hasn't seen it, either grab it. I'm sure they'll video stream it soon. It's one-to-one, John and Yoko. I can't recommend it highly. Plus, if you're an old history guy like me, you wouldn't believe the amount of people they recycled from the 70s. You got this, everybody from Betty Friedan to Jerry Rubin, and really cool stuff. So that's all. If you haven't seen it yet, Russell, or anybody that's interested, check it out. It was. He did Mother. For Wendy, if you're not a big Lennon fan, that was a Plastic Ono band. He was going through his primal scream therapy, and the performance is amazing. He blew it away in the movie, and that was my.
I'm going to take your lead on that. The last one, what was the one with Led Zeppelin that was phenomenal?
That was becoming Led Zeppelin. What they did
Yeah.
is they focused on just the beginnings of Led Zeppelin. Yeah, and once again, and I'll get the hell off of this. You know me with music. Isn't it interesting in life how you're in the right place or you're not in the right place, and how crazy weird things happen? In 1960, I'll be real brief with this. In 1969, the Rolling Stones gave what I believe the greatest performances in the history of rock and roll. It's what comprised the Get Your Ya-Ya's record. And they were so locked in on black music that their opening acts, check this out, Jeff Shearer, because you like a good concert. Not only were they in their prime, but their opening acts were B.B. King and Ike and Tina Turner.
Wow.
But they also had a white British blues singer named Terry Reid. The guy was great, and Jimmy Page offered him the job as lead singer, and he passed. Probably not the best career move.
Probably not. Definitely not. Yeah,
So
I mean,
Larkin, once again, you got us off topic. What is it with you? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, you were talking about General Motors, and I thought I would mention probably the most epic bad vehicle design that they ever did. It kind of reminds me of the Cybertruck, but predates it, called the Pontiac Aztec. And the thing that I remember,
you know, I hate to interrupt my esteemed colleague Ian Nethercott, but once again, you're not paying attention. They were around the room, and the marijuana came out, and they said, "Hey, what do rich people want when they get a Cadillac? They want something really small and insignificant." And they invited the Lincoln guys who had the hashish, and the Lincoln guys took a Granada and made it into the Lincoln Versailles, and the Cadillac, they took a Chevy Nova and made it into the Cimarron. You talk about a bad idea. Let's take the premium. At this point, Lexus hadn't flexed its muscles. Mercedes was still a bit of an oddball. The premier luxury cars were Cadillac and Lincoln, and they decided to downsize their cars into their cheapest, smallest models. That was pretty scary.
Well, Cadillac did okay in the end of things. Look at the change in Cadillac, man. And we talked about this, I think, some months ago, but you know, Buick and Oldsmobile. Well, some of the Buicks are pretty nice looking today.
Yep.
They went from being an old man's car to hip because they came out with those little SUVs that actually looked pretty cool.
And Cadillac went into the stratosphere, man. You know, now it's all wrappers, and you know, they put a Corvette engine in a sedan.
They did two things, Jeff. I remember I was a caddy guy. First, this harkens back to Mr. Hill. If you thought a Cadillac, it was like Guy Martino. It was like elderly guys with elderly cars on the way to the golfing tournament. When they broke out and changed, remember, Russell? They used Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll. It was probably the first time Zeppelin authorized anything outside of something off their record.
Yeah.
And the other thing was rappers like the Escalade. And all of a sudden, a Cadillac became hip. Because trust me, you weren't putting a rapper into a sedan DeVille. But the Escalade turned everything the hell around. It became such a hot car.
oh yeah, I mean it was funny because you were bringing up Nissan. I had the pleasure of working with Nissan for about a year and a half, and that was when Mr. Gone was running the show, rightly or wrongly, looking back. But the thing that was interesting at the time was they were doing a lot of new designs. But what surprised me was the pushback from the dealers, like, oh yeah, well, you know, you need to do more. But at the time that they were on a tear because they had new designs. But now it's like, well, yeah, we're in financial dire straits. We don't have any new models, but someone please help us.
Hey,
Help
Gary,
us fix
tell me,
that.
is it true that the biggest redesign that Gone looked after was putting a very plush floor mat in the trunk? So when they smuggled him across the border, he'd be comfortable back there?
You always got to have a new design.
Tim, you've been involved in a bunch of products, so you probably, between the giant group you're involved with, there's got to be Nissan or people that commiserate with Nissan.
Well, when I was down in Texas, I was actually at a Nissan dealer. I was running a Nissan dealer, and one of the fun things about it is you can lose money really, really quick at that dealer. They work operating the dealer, but it's a lot of work to make money. We're able to do both. But yeah, it's an interesting product, the Nissan, in concept. They really have too many dealers out there is the big problem they ran into. They needed to downsize the amount of dealers they have in each area. Could probably go and then streamline it a little bit more like what Mazda's done with their branches. Mazda did something really cool because I was with Mazda the longest. I was with Toyota, Mazda, and then Nissan a little bit. But Mazda's
Hold on, I got a public announcement. Tim runs one of the best, most successful, most progressive Mazda places of all time.
well, I did.
And is the
It's
rumor
not
true?
Volkswagen, but
Is the rumor true that when you were mugged behind the building, your first question was, "What do you drive?" That can make you a heck of a deal.
oh, absolutely. But what Mazda did was it's kind of wild because they picked up market share in the United States. They've kind of followed Toyota's branding with everything. They have they didn't try to overproduce a bunch of cars. They produced 6 or 7 or 8 cars, but they did a really, really good job with most of those trim lines. So it was really, really cool to see. And then they was like, okay, we're not going to try to sell everybody. We're going to try to sell our people. Well, a lot like Subaru. We're not trying to sell everybody a car. We're going to find our people and we're going to sell them a car. And so like Mazda kind of, for the most part, did it a good way. And they since 2014 have really, really gained market share and really just is kind of starting to establish their brand now on that. Nissan, it seemed like they don't know exactly where they're at. Now you talk about Honda. I mean, I mostly recently was at a Nissan store. They were trying to they removed the CEO, stepped down. They have a new CEO in. He's trying to bring back, or last I heard, they were trying to bring back talks with Honda of how they were going to merge.
Right.
And on those on those items and how they can work together. Really, Nissan's looking for some of Honda's technology and buy-in. I know they are also connected with Mitsubishi. Nissan is, and talk about that. That's a brand itself too.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. But they're trying to figure out where they're going right now. And
Hey, Tim. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a flashback. This is a pattern interrupt moment. I had a flashback from about 23, 4 years ago. I think I met you and may have done business with you. Were you in Tulsa ever, or Broken Bow?
No, not at all.
Okay. Were you in Norman, Oklahoma?
No.
Okay. So much for the LSD. It didn't work.
My whole car business was in Ohio.
My earlier reference, Russell just made my point sideways.
But Tim, I had a question for you though. Do you think Infinity is part of the reason why Nissan has so much trouble? Like,
Yeah.
I just don't think they need that brand. Like, I don't think it adds any value at all.
I think Nissan, Infinity's part is it's not luxury enough for at least for the American public.
Doesn't separate itself as much.
Yeah.
I was at an NADA meeting when I was a dealer. I'll never forget it. And I was sitting with a guy that had an Infinity store, and the Infinity rep came over because he obviously knew him, and he said, "I just want to tell you, I'm an Infinity dealer and I'm a millionaire." And he said, "Oh, I'm so proud." He said, "Don't be proud. When I bought the store, I was a multimillionaire." And we always, Ian, we always seem to wait till the very end to get in Mr. Larkin.
Yeah, let's get him in early.
And Wendy.
Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
In with Wendy, because he always defers to women. Wendy and then Mr. Larkin.
You're muted. Not anymore.
Sorry.
No worries.
You were muted. Can we just hold on to that and let Fred savor that moment? He's been waiting to mute you for years.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if you could do that? Well, now we're like we're literally ships that pass in the night, so it works. So I can't tell much about today, but boy, when I hear about, I remember 09 was it 010 when I was at Amato and the Nissan came out with the Leaf. And I remember it was so revolutionary then. It was so controversial. It was one of the early ones. So to hear you guys now saying that they missed the EV race is kind of sad. But it's the same as the Greeks, you know, that were way ahead of everybody else, and their greed got in the way, and look what happened, right? So, but I listened to you. I had in the 80s, I had a Delta. I had an 86, 88. I had a 98 Regency. My dad used to buy my stepmom. He was a GM at a Buick dealership, Fresco Buick in Milwaukee. And every year he'd buy her a white Cadillac Eldorado convertible. And old models, remember the Opel GT? When I was 16 and I used to drive cars to the auction for my dad, I remember driving one of those babies. I think it was a 70-something model. And I remember being with a semi next to me on the freeway, and I literally could have done a, you know, Fast and Furious move and slid right under the truck, right? And gone over. And then you said something about the Chevy Nova. I had a 78 Chevy Nova that gave me my best memories because the plugs were easy to get to those V8s then, and it used to always flood out. So I worked at Amato then. I literally, guys, in like a very young person in automotive, when I flooded them, my dad bought me a socket set. I'd push it into the bay. When the service department was closed, change my plugs, pass the other set off to parts to sandblast it, and I was ready for the next time. So there was so much character to those vehicles back then. And so many good
1975 Wendy,
memories.
the number one selling
Wonderful.
vehicle in the United States was the Olds Cutlass.
Yeah, I love the old Cutlass too. Yeah,
And
those too.
if you were standing on
Great
the
old
corner
cars.
playing football, which I often was back then, and you saw from a distance a Cutlass and a Grand Prix come down the street, you could tell the difference. This was before General Motors lost their mind, and even dealers couldn't tell the difference between the cars. They were mass producing all the vehicles and rebadging them.
I remember that. Yeah, the same as what was that? The Monte Carlo? That was the equipment for the Chevy.
You could tell those cars a mile away.
Oh yeah.
But you also, you
Yeah.
had the Pontiac GTO, right? Because everybody would modify the what is it? The gas, the throttle. What is it? The carburetor.
Yeah.
And because the carburetor was very accessible, like you were saying, you could get to.
Gary, don't talk about carburetor. We're going to lose our entire 16-year-old audience.
Well, you probably already lost them. They're wondering what the hell are they talking about?
Exactly. What is the carburetor, right? Because now it's all covered with emissions.
Well, if you guys got a weed whacker in your garage, it's got a carburetor. That's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Larry and I both own Grand Prix, and
What year was yours, Jeff?
71.
Yeah, that 69, the 70, the 71, they were just great. You put your foot on the gas, they went sideways. They were so quick.
I built
Only-
the crap out of
The only
it.
complaint I ever had, and I love that car, was it wasn't always leather or cloth. My seats were vinyl.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
used to wear shorts because I played a lot of basketball. Wendy,
Oh
I'm
man,
close
that
enough with
hurts.
you now to show you the griddle marks that are still on my
Yeah.
legs all these years.
Yeah.
I had the second fastest car in high school behind a 70 Chevelle SS with a Howland option.
And you could
I
buy
had
that. The gas wasn't unleaded. You could go to Sunoco and buy 103 octane. Hey, my buddy Abdul, I put some comments in there, my brother. Tell
Well,
some
one of
good
the
memories.
things he was talking about cars and all of that. One of the great things is that you were talking about Maxima. Maxima was one of my favorites, and I started driving them in the 90s once I got in the car business. Because if you remember, of all the Nissan cars, Maxima was the one that was truly made in Japan, and that's why it was such a smooth ride. And then we had this Oldsmobile, and at the Browning Group with the Acura and Dodge and everything, we had the Oldsmobile and we had the Mitsubishi, and you saw what happened with Mitsubishi at that time. So you've seen all of these cars that reinvent themselves or go away, like Datsun.
Abdul, but Mitsubishi didn't have a design problem. The guys that were smoking weed for Mitsubishi were the finance guys that thought, let's let's do 000. What could
Yeah, oh yeah, for 8 years or some shit. Yeah, it was really
I
5.
don't
but
remember
yeah, I
the
don't
exact
know.
number. Did they lose $500 million or 300? It was insane.
Well, here's one thing about Chrysler, because when I was with Chrysler with the Browning Group, and you were talking about Mercedes-Benz joining with Daimler Chrysler merger that happened, and then they left too early, and Chrysler became with all of the 300 models, the Charger models, and all the engineering that came from the sedans of Mercedes-Benz, and Chrysler Jeep Dodge took off, and now they had to bail out who they bailed out when they became with the group, the French group that
Peugeot.
Peugeot.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you see things that happens, and they lost $30 billion in that deal. Mercedes.
Abdul, the best though, if you ever read Iacocca's biography, is he woke up and he realized how many K cars had been reported but weren't sold. They had them parked in a giant lot.
Yes, I was in high school. I was watching his commercials. Buy the best cars, and like you said, he got the bailout, and how soon he paid it off to the government. So there's great history in car buffs, that you see in there, and that was my love affair. And Opel was another one. One of the first cars we got was the VW Bug in the 60s as a family, and Opel at that time. I believe it was a German car at that time.
Russell, he's getting really passionate. Can we send him a copy of Night at the Opera by Queen? That's the song I'm in love with my car.
Well,
we can make this Abdul's walk-up music.
Yes, love that song.
Okay, now you're talking.
I don't want to shut out Mike Larkin. Michael, what are your thoughts? Oh, and by the way, I invited Mr. Silman and Mr. Larkin because we're going up on the first day of July to shoot more Larry Talks. And if anybody's anywhere near Connecticut and they want to join us and have some fun, it's always a pleasant dinner and a great time with those guys. So anybody that's around.
Where's dinner at, Larry?
What's that?
Where's dinner?
What's that place?
McDonald's?
No, the good steak
Burger
joint.
King? No, it was a steak place.
It's a steakhouse, Russell.
Yeah.
It's good, man.
Yeah. What was it? It was a nice one.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember. But Mr. Larkin, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know what? My first car was from my cousin, and it was first of all, it was in the late 80s, and we all remember Prince, right? What was his famous song?
Little Red Corvette.
Yeah.
Right. I had a little red Chevette, but everybody kind of got that mixed up with that song. So I was driving a little red Corvette, as far as you know. But by senior year,
Michael, if you can't tell the difference between a Chevette and a Corvette, boy, do I wish you had.
it was a 4-door
used
hatchback.
car.
And by senior year, I had first and fourth gear. You should see that thing on the highway. But it wasn't a Corvette. But every time I picked up my friends in college that were out getting drunk, I'd have to pick them up with my little red Corvette.
Let me interrupt you just for a second, and I'm not being facetious. I just noticed something when Larkin was talking, or when Abdul was talking. Look at the passion we used to have for cars.
Yes.
Still do, man.
Listen, I get in my car now. It's fast. It's nice. I'm not complaining. But the passion we had for our cars, they were so much.
Dude, mine was a 69 Oldsmobile Delta 88.
Yeah.
You know why?
That was my first car. It was the best car of my entire life.
No, you know
They
why,
had
Larry?
character.
It's because we can work on them.
I was gonna say you can't fix them.
There's nothing you can do today.
What you could do is you sprayed that crap into the carburetor if it wouldn't start. There was 4 things under the. Even a dope like me could work on it. You had a screwdriver and water. Is there anybody on this panel that didn't have their father say, if the car overheats, give it time to cool down before you take off the radiator cap?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the father-son mess.
Yeah.
And daughter.
Yes, it was. I didn't need to be saying.
But it's also
Shame
the
on you,
uniqueness,
Larry.
though.
Shame on you.
It's also the
We had that
uniqueness.
white stuff that would be on the
White
battery.
stuff.
Yeah, white stuff.
corrosion?
Right.
Oh,
Corrosion. And I
But
take
So white
Irish,
stuff.
He's talking about the foam on the beer. Let's
Back what we
I thought he was
take
talking about a line or something else. Man, I got-
a bottle of RC cola and dump it right on the battery,
Yeah.
and it would sizzle, and that white stuff would be gone.
But I
It was
also
battery acid.
Yeah, back then you could get to the battery too.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no cover.
Sandbags,
Stupid things.
what about sandbags in the trunk?
Cadillacs,
They
they
were-
were,
If it snowed, because either that, because most of the states outlawed tire chains because they chewed up the paper.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do another pattern interrupt and ask Larry if it's really true. The next thing I'm gonna say is Jim Morrison, the Doors, right? There's a song called Mr. Mojo Rises. Is everybody familiar with that song?
Yes.
Okay, and I think I read this in this book, but I'm having a recall problem right now, and I wondered if you could back me up. Mr. Mojo Rising, unscrambled spells Jim Morrison.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
just wanna make sure of that.
He was trying to be a little bit clever.
He was real clever, actually.
It's another one of those classic cases where they were just hitting their high point because
They were high.
The LA Woman record had so much good stuff on it with Riders in the Storm, and they were just hitting it. And the only one that I would put ahead of that is in the late, from 70, 71, we just got devastated because Janis Joplin her best record was Pearl, and Hendrix was stretching out in every direction. And if you want to really dip back, Larkin, maybe the most creative early guy other than Chuck Berry was Buddy Holly. This is the first guy to double track, to put strings on records. Who the hell knows what he would have done?
Yeah.
True
I
that.
believe they covered that up though, Mike Larkin. I don't think it was a plane crash. I think he poured RC Cola on something that blew up.
It was not. That's a myth. It was
Could
Coca-Cola.
be. I thought that was an urban legend. I could be wrong.
All right, let's attempt to get some kind of semblance of
Well, hold on.
Get this
One
place
last thing.
under control.
I have a prior engagement where this is, unfortunately, I'm going to have to exit. I'm just letting everybody know. It's really good to see everybody tonight, but I have a little bit of time that I need to spend with my wife because I've been out every night with the grandkids with swimming lessons. And 2 4-year-olds, let me tell you, they're a handful. Okay? So tonight's
Nice job you'll have.
yeah, it is, no doubt. But love you guys. Good to see everybody, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Okay.
Good
Yeah,
night.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Good night.
But I think to your earlier point, Larry, the reason for the passion for brands and cars historically was cars and brands were different. Today, and I remember years ago thinking about doing an exercise, just take a picture of a front of 50 different cars, take off the logos. Most of them look exactly the same. That's part of the challenge today, is that there's just so little difference in the brands. And they spend a lot of time marketing the brand and try and build a following, but like, how much difference is there today, right? Whether it's screens or
A funny story with all of you. When I was in college in '78, my dream car was Ford Mustang. So a good friend of mine drove me in Santa Monica Boulevard, Walker-Burger Ford in Santa Monica, West LA.
Yep.
And I picked up the first one. It was a '74. It was on sale for $59.99. I'll never forget it. And I went straight to the sales office, wrote it up, and didn't even test drive or anything like that. And my friend dropped me off, and he took off. And I come back about an hour and a half later, and I look at the car. It was a Saturday. And the good thing was, thank God it was Saturday. And the car comes from the detail shop and all nice and looking beautiful. And I say, look what I open it up, and it's stick shift. And I don't even know how to drive a stick shift. I fell in love with the car because that was my dream car.
I hate to one up you, Abdul, but I briefly helped the guy with the used car lot.
Right.
And not making this up, a guy named Percy, who was a salesperson, came in and said, I just sold, and he mentioned the car. And I said, cool, did you tell him it was a diesel? He said, no. I said, why not? He said, he didn't ask. That didn't go too well that day.
Yeah, to come and pick me up because he knew how to drive a stick shift, and we went to the Santa Monica College
That's a great story.
I love Mustang, my first car, so I thought that was a little funny where you don't even look into it, but it's automatic or stick shift, and there it was.
Yeah, I mean, if
It was
you're
my
sold,
first car in college.
if you're
The
sold
other
on
thing
a
about
brand,
those cars,
yeah. Go ahead.
the other thing about those cars was that they were built so strong. I remember my own '67 Mustang that I got when I was 15, and we had a circle drive, but like a little steep entrance. And I remember backed in with a little bit of momentum, boom, into a big tree, and there was barely a dent, you guys. Now, what happens? Fred bumps into my car with the RV, and it's, like $1,200 damage. It's ridiculous. Back then, if there was minor damage, our friends would be bondoing it and fixing it, or like knocking it out and bondoing it and using touch-up paint, and boom, we were ready to go again. We didn't spend a dime.
Wendy, if you back your Tesla into a tree, you better need a second mortgage when you see what they charge you to get that thing repaired.
I bet.
Well, did you see that? Did you see the article this week? There's a whole car container ship full of electric cars, and half of it's on fire.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Remember the Mazda that instead of being on the water,
Yep.
we're under the water, the Mazda?
Yeah.
But there was an accident, Ian.
Yeah. yeah. Nudge, nudge, hint, hint, say no more. Yeah. It was like that one, I think it was off the coast of Alaska, and the ship was halfway over, and they were trying to right it and then trying to figure out what that was worth the trouble. It was full of cars.
But listen, we've talked about all the great things. How about the disastrous things? How about the Corvair having this spear, which is what led Ralph Nader to write Unsafe at Any Speed? Because if you got into an accident, you got impaled on your own car.
Oh yeah.
The Pinto was basically a hand grenade.
Yeah.
Hey, the Ralph Nader's Tarrant Museum is in Winstead, Connecticut. Just want you to know that. I want to give you a little geography.
Garrett, I had a car show when I had my caddy store, and I interviewed Ralph Nader. Don't ask me how I got him.
Wow.
And he took a liking to me. God knows why. And he said, Feldman, I like you. And would you like me to tell you what's wrong with our government? Now, Tim, I don't know how much you know about Ralph Nader, but when he wrote Unsafe at Any Speed, every conservative hated him, because that was back when the motto was, as General Motors goes, so goes the United States. Yeah. Then he ran against Bush and Gore, and they figure he siphoned off Gore votes. Now every liberal hates him. So in my book, if the liberals and the conservatives hate you, you're doing something right.
Yes.
So he said, let me tell you what's wrong with the government. I'm like, how often do you get Ralph Nader to tell you what's wrong? And he said, are you a sports fan? Now, this is back before everybody was making $25 million a year and not playing hard. And I said, I am. So he said, well, you can probably name your infield. Well, that was easy because the Phillies back then had a powerful infield, and I could name. And he says, most people can name the starting five of their basketball team and this. He says, but what they can't name is their aldermen or their congressmen or the people that make the laws or set up their schools. So Nader's, he's not a guy.
He was a smart guy. He was ahead of himself. Yeah.
And listen, look what he did as far as safer food and safer water.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty interesting guy. So I just had to throw that in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at people that change things, whether it be Nader or other people, I mean, they definitely have to, make some bold choices, and sometimes they're way ahead of their time with those choices, and obviously are unpopular sometimes as well. But if you're going to change anything, you've got to look at, things that are different. And I think that part of the challenge today from an advertising and brand philosophy is that you got the same people that put a disaster on this brand or putting a disaster on another brand, and people just aren't seeing that. They aren't saying, hey, like, we're not doing that. Like, we appreciate the offer. We appreciate that you think that's a good idea, but it didn't work so well last time. And I think a lot of it is basically just, you have to look at it and say, okay, how can I differentiate my brand? But more importantly, retain those customers. I mean, you're sitting in a Volkswagen showroom. I mean, when I look at that Volkswagen electric bus, nothing wrong with it. If they had done a gas bus when they did the Beetle, what was that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? they would have sold the hell out of those things. Like, I don't know what they were thinking with that. Like, to me at the time, that was a massive missed opportunity. The Beetle was rocking it. If they had done the same thing,
And they were ahead of, in a bad way, I believe, or right in line with Lexus.
Yep.
And Infiniti and Acura. They decided to come up. I think it was called the Phaeton. Am I right?
Yeah.
Tim? It was like a $70,000 or $80,000 Volkswagen. As if a BMW guy was going to say, you know, I think I need a little more prestige. I think I'm going to grab a Volkswagen.
Well, and I told a similar story 2 years ago, or whenever when I started on here. When I was in the marine business, Bayliner, who's really kind of the, I don't know, the
Boat to have, the boat to have. That was in
well,
the right price.
it's the Hyundai of boats. I mean, you know, Hyundai's improved, but
Well, you gotta be careful calling Hyundai and Kia.
no, today they're fine.
It's not perceived as a high end. He's not saying it's not good. He's
Right,
right.
okay, it's an average man's boat.
So Bayliner decided they want to build a fly bridge, which for those that don't know, you've got controls up on top, which is open, kind of a double decker thing. But nobody wanted to spend $300,000 or $400,000 to have something that said Bayliner on the side. So they actually, in Brunswick, who's the largest boat manufacturer, created a new brand called Meridian. And people bought it because it didn't say Bayliner. It was still the same thing, built in the same factory. And it's funny because I was inside one once at a boat show and they were docking it and the guy hit the dock a little too hard. I saw the wall flex in. So, but,
Jeff,
you know,
in terms of, first of all, you're 100% right. Second of all, if you don't think perception is reality, most of you know that my dealership was in Ewing, New Jersey, which is the next street over from Trent, New Jersey. And there was a college that if you paid people, they wouldn't go to it. It was called Trenton State College. And then they got smart and they renamed it the College of New Jersey. And the attendance blew up through the roof. It hasn't changed. I guess what we're back to, it's always back to marketing. It's always back to how people perceive what you have, what you don't. We said earlier, all of a sudden the Escalade, where people would never think of a Cadillac, a rapper, the Escalade's cool. It just depends on how it's perceived, whether it's now these days, whether it's an influencer or in some way, shape, or form, it hooks in with people's imaginations, and enough people think it's cool, and then it's cool.
well, just look at Hyundai as a brand. So if you look at Hyundai back in the day, it was the Hyundai Pony, which broke so often, people were there all the time. But then when you move forward to today and you have Genesis that built a brand really about a catastrophic accident with Tiger Woods. Like really, I mean, when you think about Hyundai and Genesis and you compare them to Nissan and Infiniti, couldn't be more different. I mean, when you look at it today, I mean, I would think if people comparing those brands, they'd probably say they're pretty comparable, if not Hyundai being ahead of them, right?
my wife and I started dating. She had I think an 88 Hyundai Excel.
Oh yeah.
It was carbureted.
Which
and
was
a heavy set man with one leg could beat that car going up the hill. That
was
might have been
terrible.
the slowest car in the history of the planet.
she's still very defensive about the Hyundai brand. And I said, honey, it's nothing like it was then, but it's a lot better.
Yeah.
That brand turned around. I was there. And when they came out, I think it was 1999, when they came out with the Elantra. It had power windows and it had the 100,000-mile warranty. And all of a sudden, the perception started to change. And then you guys all know what happened next. The residuals started to change. And all of a sudden, you could lease it because we always took a beating. We were a Cadillac Hyundai dealer because even if you liked the Sonata, it eventually got pretty good. You couldn't lease it because the residual was so soft.
Let me say one more thing, and then I like to hear from Fred.
Hey, Fred, buddy.
Didn't Nissan sort of went all in on the Altima? Did they not?
Yes.
Yeah.
You started, and I don't know if it was leases. Ian, maybe you know.
Leases.
But you know, there's just
Well,
tons of them on the road.
they were phasing out the Maxima, so they did a couple things. They made the car a little better, and they also made it available as an all-wheel drive car.
Yeah.
So they were trying to position it, but if you've ever driven an Altima, it's a nice car, but it never felt as heavy as the Maxima. The Maxima had a heavy feel and it was fast. It was just a smart mix. It really was a four-door sport.
Yeah, because you were going up against the Accord and the Camry, and you had kind of like it was like back in the day they had like the Civic, the Corolla, and the Sentra, I think it was. And like no one bought the Sentra. Like you bought the Sentra because there was no other options. Like it was a payment, it was a lease rate, you weren't buying that car. The same was true with, you had Toyota, you had Honda, and then you had them. And to your point, Larry, without the Maxima, they didn't really have a premium car, even though, the Avalon never made a big seller. I mean, they didn't really compete against anybody else without that car. So then people are like, well, like why? And they're like, well, if it's cheap enough, maybe I look at it, right?
Fred, how are you, my buddy?
He's muted. He's coming in though. Hey, what's going on,
good,
Fred?
guys.
Good to see you.
Hey, what happened to the Titan? They stopped making the Titan.
Titan. Well, that was interesting. So when I worked for Nissan, they had the Titan, and it was, I think, a V8 at the time. And then they were their big push at the end of my role there with the OEM was, we're going to do this diesel engine. we're gonna bring in the big diesel. We're gonna reinvigorate this truck till it's like a real truck or something. And that lasted, I think, maybe a year or two, and then the whole thing just like collapsed under its own weight. Because part of the reason is, I think Toyota is really the only of the big three Japanese that have a foothold. I mean, Honda, Ridgeline, whatever. I don't know what that thing is. Neither the Honda dealers. And Toyota was like, well, can we play in that? Maybe. But they just couldn't go up against Toyota, even with I'm trying to think what the diesel they used. I don't remember off the top of my head. But, I mean, I think they were trying to sort of, punch above their weight class and get into the big three American weight class, which was never going to happen. Like, if they had even ate a little bit of the Toyota stuff, that would have been good for them. But Toyota's got their own challenges now with their big pickup. They had a big challenge with their engine design where they had to recall. Not good. So I think on the truck front, Nissan was dreaming. Like, was it a Duramax? It might have been Duramax. I don't know.
Those Titans, you could use the gas gauge as a speedometer.
Hey, that's what I drive. I got an 05 Titan.
Yeah, but it was a diesel. That's a V8, right?
Good
Gasoline.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so old Datsun.
Yeah.
They run forever. I got 278,000.
Wow. There you go.
And I mean, the dash has rotted from the sun out here in Arizona. I was doing dash mat over it. I should have had dash mat before, but I didn't, and just crumbled. But I mean, it's gonna die or I gotta die. Or holding on to it, and having a payment. I mean,
not a bad truck. They just they didn't move. Like they couldn't compete.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Toyota was in the big three Japanese. Toyota has always kind of dominated that market. I mean, I don't see how Nissan could have hoped to get there. But there is some interesting stuff going on in that market now with the relaunch of a lot of these small pickups. Be it from the big three, or now there's that Slate one, which is going to be electric, like snap together Lego toy. I don't know how that's going to go, but that return to say I need an entry level pickup again, back to where they were, say in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where it wasn't this thing with screens everywhere and whatever. And I think that's a huge market opportunity, because if you're a pickup driver and you don't need a long bed, I mean, to me, that's a big market, especially for the younger set who, need something affordable. I mean, I'm trying, was it the Range? I'm trying to think. I think even Subaru and Toyota had one way back, but the Ranger was the big one that they've sort of tried to come back with. But I think that the smaller pickup market is going to be a big market again, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, what's everyone's thoughts about this huge recall on Ford trucks that was announced on all the heavy duty due to the brake calipers missing?
Brake calipers missing? Really?
Yep. Yeah.
Wow. Like from new, or they just fall out?
Announced today.
Ooh.
All the F series, all recall, and don't drive them. Send them, bring them, probably home to the dealership.
So
A
the brake caliper's dropping or missing or what? Broken?
Well, there's a component in the brake caliper that's holding that when you press too hard on the brake will give up, and the car will speed off, and you can't stop it. So huge recall was issued, and it's the third recall ever since the pandemic, because before the pandemic, all of these top assembly foremen that took an early retirement, and the ones right behind them, in my humble opinion, there probably was 75% trained or 80% trained, and that's why you're having huge recalls across the board with not only Ford and even Honda and Toyota.
So it's not about the brake pads; it's
They're
assembly.
all anticipating an increase in their body shop business.
Yes. Well, not only that, liabilities for a while, So I thought I'll get your feels on
So
it.
is that assembly? Is that an assembly problem or a skill set problem?
That problem, exactly.
It's not a brake pad problem, because I know some of those brake pads they had issues.
Assembly problem, just like Boeing's door that blew off was an assembly problem on the bolts that.
Oh yeah, they forgot to put the bolts in on the planes.
Yeah. These came up with that yesterday, and put the onus on Boeing and FAA for not checking up on the bolts. Quality control, everything after pandemic on these vehicles across the board, whether it be Chevy, Ford, Toyota, Honda, they're having issues, but Ford has really been hit hard.
So maybe
the thing with the Boeing plane with the door flying off, it kind of finally eased us out of the horrible concept of everybody that's ever been around a car shop has one horror story about when they didn't tighten the bolts on a tire and the tire fell off the car.
Yes.
That certainly raised the ante when the door blows off a plane.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a big difference when you're 30,000 feet up.
I mean, I think when you look at recalls and you look at the volume of them over the last, say, 20 years, I mean, starting from Audi way back with unintended acceleration and Toyota with the same problem. But, when you look at all these things, you got to kind of question, like, are they inspecting the cars before they ship them? I mean, that's the question I would have. Like, is it about rate of production, or is it about just skill set, or is it they're just not doing an inspection before they ship them?
And who's inspecting the inspectors?
Yes.
It's the old thing. If someone's not holding accountable the people that are supposed to be accountable, you still get in trouble. Right, Tim? You've managed enough people that
Absolutely.
Are we on top of this? Oh, we got it handled, boss. What do
you got to inspect what needs to be inspected, and dive into what needs to, and double check it, triple check it. 100%.
You would think of the PDI though of that car when it lands that they would look at that. Were they just unaware of it, or?
I just looked it up. The Ford recalled a 1.3 million vehicles.
Right.
So that's what I don't know what years they were, but that's what I just looked up online.
Wow.
They're from 2020 to 2025.
Wow.
And with some do not drive.
Most all said do not drive. That what the article was. The warning was do not drive.
They got employee pricing. Hey, what do you want?
Employee pricing, exactly, and there's new ads that's going on.
But that's
Somebody
a huge.
didn't hire that employee.
It's about marketing. If you can't drive the car, that means it's more fuel efficient.
Weren't those the trucks that are made of aluminum because it was lighter or something? Wasn't that the deal with those things? Yeah. Remember people were joking about it? Yeah.
That's what truck when with all this climate change and all these rainstorms, and the drivers come in and they're all soaked, and the seats would not pick up, the sensors will not pick up, and the cars will stop because there's too much humidity in the interior of the vehicle. The sensors in Tesla would not start the engine.
Yeah,
so there's so many issues.
I would say when you look at,
I've got a question for you, Ian.
Yeah.
Your experience with Nissan,
Yeah.
Is it going back to the marketing and branding and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. It could be an urban myth.
Yeah.
But the Rogue was that coming out
The
after the
Rogue.
Star Wars movie or before?
Well, it's funny that you bring up the Rogue because that was the actual demo I was given to drive. And years before, I'd worked for Honda, so I sold CRVs against, at the time, what did they have, X-Trail or some, I don't know, some other really crappy vehicle. And then they replaced it with the Rogue. I'm not sure the naming, if that came with the Star Wars or they just saw that as a happy opportunity, but they worked it as hard as they could. But the thing that was funny, looking at it backwards, but also looking at it before when I used to sell against Nissan, was the Rogue was never a great vehicle. Like still today, probably underpowered. But what they did do right, in my opinion, with the Rogue, is they actually made it at least look good. It was kind of like back in the day when you had the Toyota RAV4. It was very feminine looking, like it was very rounded and kind of ugly. And then they got smart and they said, well, we still got to attract the men to at least want to look at the car. Like maybe the women are buying it, but like we got to at least make it look, masculine or at least somewhat tough. And I think that's what Nissan was trying to do with the Rogue, is they were trying to make it sort of measure up to the competitors, which are many in that space, mostly Honda, Toyota, but Hyundai and Kia and other brands who were all going much more masculine. But I think they played it right with, they had like stormtroopers and showrooms and, they did a lot of fun stuff with it, which I don't know if it was a happy accident, but they clearly put all the money in it. And realistically, SUVs at the time, and even today, I would say are still the lion's share of what most manufacturers are selling, whether it's a small, mid, or large. I mean, that's still the big market, I think. I mean, I would say that
you see a lot of roads on the road.
Yeah.
A lot of roads.
The Nissan Rogue was a 3-year-old Nissan Rogue was probably a #1 subprime car in the market because they were off lease. They came off lease, and that trend hurt a lot of dealers over tax season because with not producing 3 years of not having that vehicle. And that was a go-to lease. And when you had some marginal credit, you had people in the 650s and the 600s, that's where you could drive a lot of sales. And that's a missing vehicle, because that vehicle was like, I don't know, I just remember like last couple of years, it's like a $20,000 used car with 100,000 miles on it. That's perfect for a subprime.
But look at the new Kicks. I mean, there's a good example. The Kicks, that was a really goofy looking, stupid looking vehicle when it first came out. But now it's squared off. It's more angular. I saw one the other day. It's very masculine looking. They're doing exactly the same thing. It's like, okay, let's de-uglify this thing, and not to beat up the Leaf. Not to beat up the Leaf, but the Leaf had the same problem. They didn't do anything with it. Like, it was cool.
But they're buying the Mini. The Mini wins over that little market. So they are the little markets. There's a couple of providers that win in the different markets. I see the Koreans, Kia, and Hyundai will continue to grab market share. Now with Genesis, they'll continue to grow. Mazda's on a nice angle. If you have a Mazda, because it used to be a single point Mazda was like a redheaded stepchild. and now
they used to connect it all with Ford for years back until 2000.
Yeah. Now that Toyota's in the financing end, Mazda's going to continue to grow. Their new showrooms are very, very modern. They're very, very neat. They're efficient. And they're attracting a whole different character in there, because now you can go in there and you can hang out. And so I'm curious to see, and Mazda is definitely going to grab market share.
But I think
they also get fabulous reviews from things like Foreign Driver.
But Mazda and Subaru. Mazda and Subaru are in play.
Has always done a masterful job.
Yeah, Mazda and Subaru are in play. Like, someone's going to buy them, I think. I would be shocked
Subarus are in Colorado.
Yeah.
Money, man.
Oh, yeah. I mean
New
that
England,
Hey,
New England too. New
Yeah.
England Subaru's
Yeah.
money in New England.
But why wouldn't a brand like Toyota or Hyundai Kia or someone like that buy that brand just for the niche play? Like when you think about Mazda 25 years ago, I mean they didn't have a lot of cars. Like I mean the Miata
No,
was
they
kind of
didn't,
their
but
hit,
they were
and
still
after
hitting.
that it's kind of like what are we doing here, right?
Well,
So
they had
They
a
were
couple.
always good at designing a fun car, right? Remember how hot the Miata was for a
Yeah.
while?
Well, they had that rotary engine.
yeah,
Right? They
yeah,
had the rotary
RX-7,
engine
yeah,
in there.
yeah. They're talking about bringing that back.
Hey,
They've been talking about bringing that back for a while now.
they
Oh,
might
yeah.
be they'll do it with hydrogen, and then they'll be right back in action.
They talk about Mazda
Yeah.
being bought out. I would not be surprised
Yeah.
eventually if Toyota opens up their checkbook and just goes in. And
Well, didn't they do?
Yeah.
Didn't they do a? They did a collaborative project. I'm not sure if it was just with. Was it with Subaru or was it with Mazda? Toyota.
Well, Toyota's done stuff with Subaru before. This
Yeah.
was back in the day. But back about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But here recently with Mazda, they with the Mazda Financial Services, which is Toyota Financial Services, they share a plant down in Alabama where they make two different car lines there, with one with Toyota, one with the Mazda CX-50. So
Yeah.
they come right out of Alabama there. So there's some things that are happening. They deny that that's ever going to happen, but that's something that's wouldn't be surprised in the
And
next 5
they're
years.
sharp, man. You know, their styling has come a long way,
Yeah.
Mazda.
Oh, absolutely. And that if that could continue to be an American manufacturer, or if they continue to build out and put those vehicles together in Alabama, they'll win with a lot of the tariffs now. So
Yeah.
I do see Mazda is in a very good position.
Yeah, I mean when you look at the growth over the last 25 years for Mazda, I mean it's not quite where Hyundai and Kia are, but I mean
Oh no.
for a
but
small
they're-
brand, even Subaru, for a small brand, when you look at their growth, it's pretty significant. Like I would say Mazda used to have what 2-3 models, now they have what 6?
6, 7,
Yeah.
7 months.
They have some nice models. Yeah, and then they used to have like the franchise that was on the last building on the left that was somebody's used car lot before, and then they slapped on the Mazda and said now you're a Mazda dealer.
So they're like Mitts. They're like Mitts is today. We're going there to buy some used cars. Oh, by the way, we sell this new car. Yeah, nobody wants that, man.
You got $40,000 worth of parts in 25 old cars that we can't get rid of. Welcome to your franchise.
I was working with a dealer group, and they had a Mitsubishi store. I'm trying to remember where they were, somewhere in Oregon, and they used the Mitsubishi store for a lunchroom for the other locations.
That's
And I said to him, I said, "What's your target for new cars for this store in a month?" They said 7.
At least put it in a used.
So you're
At least
aware.
put it in the used car center.
So
Sell
you're-
some used cars with it. I mean,
So you're aware. I was briefly a Mitsubishi dealer.
Yeah.
They build a great car, but their marketing was always misguided. This sounds like I'm making this up, but I'm not. They almost got killed with 000. It destroyed it. So they decide to come back. Now they don't come back with an Elantra or a Camry. Their comeback car was the Eclipse. Now I took an Eclipse as a demo. But I thought to myself, how much demand is there for a 2-door sports car? If you're trying to bring a line back, you need a 4-door sedan that's moderately priced that looks kind of good. So but they've always built a good car. I'm just not sure about their marketing.
Well, they had
Hey
that.
guys, we're this show just blew by. I can't believe we're already past 8:00. Man, what a nice mix of guys and ladies. And by the way, Rhonda got attacked by poison ivy. That's why she's kind of been holding back for us, but she was still kind enough to show up and open up the show for us. Man, she is the definition of a trooper. And Rhonda, we're all thinking of you and waiting for you to get better quickly.
Yes.
Hopefully, Mr. Silman and Mr. Larkin, I'll see you on Tuesday if your schedule allows it in Connecticut. And the rest of you folks and ladies, it was such a pleasure. Can't thank you enough for tuning in. Gosh, we look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday.
And Mike, if you have
Okay.
questions about Nissan, just ask. I'll give you my unvarnished opinion.
Don't sugarcoat it.
No worries. I don't work for him anymore, just so you know.
Everybody stay healthy and have a great night.
Joe.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.